It is Monday, February 16th, 2026. I want you to just take a look at your calendar and then maybe take a hard look at your bank account.
Oh, okay.
Because if you're a founder, a tech investor, or, just obsessed with how the future gets built, I want you to picture something. Rewind the clock 10 years, even 5. The playbook was so simple.
Terribly simple.
You had a napkin sketch, you flew to Sand Hill Road, you got a check from a guy in a fleece vest, and you went off to conquer the world. One product, one planet, one internet.
It sounds almost nostalgic now, doesn't it? Like a bedtime story from a much simpler era.
It really does. Because today, that map hasn't just been rewritten, it's been torched. We are living in a split reality, and to navigate it, we are unpacking this massive, dense analysis. It's called Sino-US VC Differences and Global Financing Strategies.
It just dropped, and it paints a picture of a world that is, radically divided.
And we're not just talking about, exchange rates here.
No, not at all. This deep dive is about two colliding civilizations of innovation. We're looking at how the United States and China have just fundamentally gone in different directions in their philosophy, their legal structures, their survival instincts.
We're going to cover some things that, honestly, they shocked me. We're going to talk about why Chinese founders are facing personal liability. Like, sell your house liability if their startup fails.
Yeah, that part is wild.
We're going to look at why Hong Kong, of all places, has reclaimed the #1 IPO spot in 2025. And we'll talk about the new power players in the Middle East.
It's a survival guide for a fractured world. The mission today is to understand how you, the listener, the learner, how you navigate a landscape where capital now comes with some very heavy geopolitical strings attached.
Okay, let's get into the meat of this. The source material starts with this idea of a philosophy clash. And it feels like we have two different operating systems running on the same planet. But is this just, academic jargon? Or are they actually building different things?
Oh, they are building completely different things, optimized for completely different goals. You've got the U.S. model and you've got the China model.
Right.
In the U.S., the venture capital ecosystem is still all about disruptive innovation. It's deeply rooted in private capital money from endowments, pension funds, wealthy people.
The classic Silicon Valley dream, disruption at all costs.
Exactly. The goal is the 0 to 1 breakthrough. You find something that didn't exist before, like the iPhone or ChatGPT, and you just bring it into being.
But the China model has shifted.
Yeah.
The source material uses this very specific government phrase. What was it?
New quality productive forces.
New quality productive forces. Okay, that sounds like a mouthful of government speak. What does that actually mean on the ground?
Well, it's actually pretty descriptive if you unpack it. It's not about finding the 0 to 1 anymore. It's about going from 1 to 100.
1 to 100.
It's about taking an existing technology and scaling it for massive industrial use. It's efficiency, supply chain integration, and just pure pragmatism.
So less dating app for dogs and more robots that build cars.
Exactly. And the sources bring up a really specific comparison that I think just nails this divergence. Artificial intelligence. Here we are in early 2026, and the strategies couldn't be more different.
Let's pause on AI. We hear scaling laws thrown around constantly in the Valley. It's basically the religion of OpenAI and Google, right?
It is.
Just feed the beast more data, give it more GPUs, and it just gets smarter.
It is a brute force philosophy. And look, it works if you have the hardware. According to the data in our stack, the U.S. controls something like 74% of the high-end global AI compute.
74%.
So they can afford to be inefficient. They just stack more chips.
But China doesn't have that luxury. They're capped at, what, maybe 13% of that high-end compute because of all the export controls?
Right. So if you're a Chinese founder, you can't worship at the altar of scaling laws. You physically can't get the NVIDIA chips, the H100s or the B200s, to build a GPT-5 competitor the American way.
So you see this massive pivot in 2025. But isn't that just spin? Isn't optimizing for efficiency just a nice way of saying we're behind?
That's what a lot of people thought. Until the DeepSeek moment.
Ah, DeepSeek.
Yeah.
Right, that's the model that sort of woke everyone up.
Exactly. DeepSeek and models like it prove that you can get high-performance results with a fraction of the compute power if you optimize the algorithms ruthlessly. They shifted to what are called mixture of experts architectures.
Mixture of experts. Okay, break that down for us non-engineers.
So imagine you have a massive library. Instead of asking one genius librarian to read every single book to answer a question, you have a team of specialists. You only wake up the history expert for history questions.
Ah,
It saves massive amounts of energy and compute.
So while the U.S. is building bigger and bigger V8 engines, China is basically building these super aerodynamic electric motors.
Precisely. They turned a hardware deficit into a software architecture advantage. And that dictates where the money flows. In the U.S., early 2025 saw about $104 billion pouring into software and Gen AI.
104 billion.
But in China, the VC money has shifted almost entirely to hard tech.
Hard tech. So we're talking atoms, not bits.
We're talking humanoid robots working in factories. Companies like UB Tech and Unitree. We're talking about batteries, advanced manufacturing, commercial spaceflight. It's no longer about the next consumer app.
It's about keeping the factory of the world running, but, without humans.
Exactly. Industrial automation.
That's a fascinating pivot. One side is building a godlike AI in the cloud. The other is building an army of robots to run the supply chain. But that brings me to the money itself. Because if the goals are different, the people writing the checks must be different too.
Oh, a huge difference. In China, the days of easy USD funds, American money flowing into Chinese startups, are basically over.
Right.
The market has moved to state capital.
The sources mention government guidance funds, or GGFs. Just how dominant are they?
It's staggering. The data shows that these government funds are now injecting 6 times more capital than private sources.
Wait, 6 times? So the government isn't just a player, they are the house.
They are the market, and that changes the incentives completely. If you take money from a private VC, they want a 10x return. That's it. If you take money from a GGF, sure, they want that too, but they also want you to build a factory in their province, hire locals, and align with the national 5-year plan.
So it's a trade-off. You get the money, maybe you get tax breaks and land, but you also get the bureaucracy.
You get the bureaucracy and the policy risk. But here is where it gets really interesting. Or, honestly, kind of terrifying if you're a founder. The actual contract, the term sheet, is now completely different.
I want to circle back to this because when I read it, I'd read it like 3 times. The redemption right.
Yeah.
We usually think of a startup failure as, a sad thing. But you dust yourself off, you try again.
Right. The investors lose their money, you lose your time. That's the deal.
That is the U.S. deal. It's based on risk sharing. Venture capital is supposed to be risk capital.
But in China, the culture has shifted to what the sources call the redemption right, or a bet-on agreement.
Walk us through this. What actually happens?
Essentially, it's a clause that says if the company doesn't go public by a certain date, say 2028, or if you don't hit specific revenue metrics, the founder is personally on the hook to buy back the shares from the investor.
Personally liable, as in with your own money. Sell your car, sell your house, empty your savings liable.
Yes. The limited liability protection of the corporation is pierced. The investor is shifting all the risk from themselves onto the founder.
That sounds insane. I mean, who would sign that?
Yeah, you sign it if it's the only money available. And remember, the money is often coming from state-owned enterprises. It's taxpayer money.
Yeah.
The fund managers can't just go, oops, we lost $1 billion RMB on a risky bet.
They need accountability.
They need accountability, so they put the gun to the founder's head. It fundamentally changes the psychology of being a founder. You're not swinging for the fences anymore.
No, you're playing for survival.
Exactly. It just kills the moonshot culture. You aren't going to try to invent a flying car if failure means your family is destitute. You're going to build something safe, industrial, and predictable.
And on top of all that, the sources say they want control, right? Broad control.
Yeah, that's the other thing. In the U.S., an investor might veto, say, a sale of the company. In China, these new term sheets often give investors veto power over operational decisions, hiring, strategy, much more hands-on.
So it's a stark contrast. U.S. model, here's money, go break things. If it fails, oh well. China model, here's money, build this specific thing, and if you fail, you owe us everything.
That's a pretty good summary.
Now, a logical question for a founder might be, well, can I just play both sides, take some U.S. money, take some China money? But that brings us to the regulatory minefield. The iron curtain of tech.
This is where the walls come out. The regulatory environment in 2025 and 2026 is just incredibly aggressive.
Let's talk about CFIUS, the Committee on Foreign Investment in the U.S. They used to just review
deals, right?
They used to review them, and often they'd come up with mitigation agreements, like, okay, a Chinese firm can invest, but they can't see the source code.
Right.
That's gone. The sources say CFIUS has basically become an enforcement agency. It's just direct denials now. No, you can't do the deal.
But there's a new twist, right? It's not just money coming into the U.S., it's this reverse CFIUS.
Exactly. This kicked in around January 2nd, 2025. The U.S. government now prohibits its own citizens and its own funds from investing in specific Chinese sectors.
Which ones?
Semiconductors, quantum computing, and certain types of AI. The capital tap has been legally turned off. You cannot write that check.
So the money can't cross the border. But what about the data? I saw a note about the DOJ and CISA, the cybersecurity agency. This is the data decoupling. The new rules on sensitive personal data basically mean that if your startup handles biological data, health records, or, financial data of U.S. citizens, you effectively cannot take Chinese money.
Why? Is it just paranoia?
It's a national security strategy. The U.S. government's view is that genomic data, for example, is a strategic asset. If a Chinese investor has a board seat, or if you use Alibaba Cloud to process that data, the government just assumes the data is compromised.
So if you're a biotech founder, you can't just use a cheap, efficient Chinese cloud service to crunch your gene sequences.
Absolutely not. And this leads to what the sources call the two-track solution. Founders are realizing they can't have one global tech stack anymore. They have to build two.
Two separate systems.
Physically and logically isolated systems, one compliant with the West, one compliant with the East. It sounds incredibly expensive. You're basically running two startups.
It destroys the whole efficiency of the internet age.
Yeah.
Double the servers, double the compliance teams. Wow.
The dream of a single global platform is, well, it's dead.
Okay, so the U.S. and China are walled off. If I'm a founder, and I don't want to play by the sell my house rules of China, but I can't get into the U.S. club,
Yeah.
where do I go? Is there a neutral zone?
There is, and it's rising fast. Singapore.
Singapore is the new airlock.
That's a great way to put it. But, and this is a huge but, you can't just fake it.
What do you mean by that? You can't just rent a P.O. box and call yourself a Singaporean company.
Not anymore, no. The sources highlight this thing called the VCC framework, the Variable Capital Company. It's a corporate structure designed to be tax efficient.
Right.
But U.S. investors, Chinese regulators, they're savvy now. They demand something called economic substance.
Economic substance. Okay, that sounds like something expensive lawyers came up with.
It translates to real money spent locally. To satisfy the compliance teams at major banks, you need a local board of directors. You need to spend at least, say, $200,000 a year on local business costs. You need actual employees sitting in actual chairs in Singapore.
So it's a pay-to-play neutrality. You have to prove you aren't just laundering capital or evading sanctions.
Exactly. If you just have a shell company, CFIUS will look right through it and say, nope, this is a Chinese company with a mask. To be a global startup in 2026, you have to build a legitimate headquarters in the neutral zone.
But Singapore is a small place. Where's the big money coming from if the U.S. and China aren't trading cash?
Enter the super LPs.
The super LPs.
This is the rise of the Middle East. We're seeing the sovereign wealth funds, the PIF from Saudi Arabia, Mubadala from the UAE stepping right into that vacuum. These are massive, massive funds.
But I assume they aren't just writing checks for the fun of it. Is it just dumb money?
Far from it. That's a really dangerous misconception. You can't just walk in with a growth chart. You need vision alignment.
Vision alignment, like you mean Saudi Vision 2030.
Exactly that. If you are pitching the Saudis, you need to show how your company helps them achieve their goals. Are you helping them transition away from oil? Are you bringing digital health to their people?
And the sources mention a pay-to-play element here too, right? With technology transfer.
Yes. They want the tech. They don't just want to own a piece of your company in California. They want you to open an office in Riyadh or Abu Dhabi. They want you to train local engineers. They are using their capital to buy an innovation ecosystem for their own countries.
So to recap, you have to build two tech stacks to satisfy the U.S. and China. You have to incorporate and hire in Singapore to be neutral. And then you have to open an office in Riyadh to get the funding. This is getting complicated.
It is the mountainous world we talked about.
Yeah.
It's an obstacle course.
Let's talk about the finish line, the exit, the IPO. Because eventually investors want their money back. In 2026, where do you actually ring the bell?
Well, here's the big surprise of 2025. Hong Kong is back.
Really? I feel like everyone was writing Hong Kong off just a few years ago.
They were. It's over, they said. But the data shows HKEX reclaimed the #1 spot for global IPO fundraising in 2025.
How did they manage that?
It was a combination of things. Interest rate cuts brought liquidity back into the market. But more importantly, Hong Kong positioned itself as the home for hard tech and new economy listings. All those industrial robots and battery companies we talked about earlier.
Right.
They're listing in Hong Kong. And these are companies that, maybe couldn't list in the U.S. anymore.
That's a huge part of it, I assume.
A huge part. The sources note that NASDAQ has raised its listing standards for 2026. It has become very, very hard for smaller Chinese firms to list in New York. NASDAQ is basically saying, we only want the global elite.
So if you're a mid-tier player, or if you have sensitive supply chains, New York is effectively closed.
Exactly. So Hong Kong became the natural home for these massive industrial Chinese companies that are too big for the local markets, but maybe too sensitive for New York.
So let's bring this down to the ground level. If I'm a founder listening to this, I'm trying to figure out my story, it sounds like I can't just have one pitch deck anymore. The universal story is dead.
It is completely dead. The analysis suggests a three-narrative strategy. You need three distinct stories for the exact same company.
Okay, break them down for us. This is the practical advice.
Narrative one is for the U.S. You talk about AI algorithms, SaaS metrics, recurring revenue, and how you are leveraging scaling laws. You play to the capitalist innovation-driven mindset.
Got it. You wear the Patagonia vest and talk about disrupting the industry. Narrative two.
Narrative two is for China. You talk about supply chain integration. You talk about hard tech. You explain how your product fits into the government's 5-year plan and helps with industrial efficiency.
You talk about stability and national production. And narrative three.
Narrative three is for the Middle East. You talk about local job creation. You talk about technology transfer. You explain how you are going to help them build their local economy and diversify away from oil.
It's almost like you have to be a geopolitical chameleon.
You do. That is the job description of a CEO in 2026. You aren't just a product visionary anymore. You are a diplomat.
This brings us to the end of our dive, and honestly, my head is spinning a bit. We've moved from a flat world where capital and ideas flowed freely to this. What did you call it?
A mountainous world. A world full of walls, distinct ecosystems, and very high barriers.
Let's recap the terrain. The U.S. is still the land of disruptive innovation and risk sharing, but the walls are high for outsiders. China has pivoted to industrial scale and hard tech, but the cost is potential personal bankruptcy for founders, a literal bet of your life savings.
And in between, you have Singapore acting as the expensive airlock, and the Middle East acting as the new super LP, demanding local impact for their oil money.
It raises a really big question for me. If you have to split your tech stack, split your corporate structure, and split your narrative, does a global startup even exist anymore?
That is the provocative thought I want to leave everyone with. In 2026, the idea of a global startup, one company, one culture everywhere, that might just be a myth. Are we entering an era where every so-called global company is actually just a federation of local companies?
Like a franchise model or something?
Exactly. Loosely tied together by a brand, but totally isolated by data laws and capital walls.
It's a heavy thought. If you are a founder today, are you actually building a product, or are you just navigating a geopolitical obstacle course?
And if you are an investor, you really have to ask yourself, which side of the wall is my money on? Because you can't be on the fence anymore.
On that note, I think we all need to go check our portfolios and maybe our passports. Thanks for diving deep with us today.
Always a pleasure.